Okay, let's kick off with something I think most of us can unfortunately relate to, that sort of dread moment.
That sinking feeling.
Yeah, exactly. You glance at your phone,
Right.
and suddenly you're getting texts back from, like, everyone you know.
Asking, why did you send me this spam?
Yeah,
Or something weird.
yeah, from your personal email. That's always a fun one. Or maybe you get that notification, the heart-stopping one about unauthorized charges hitting your credit card.
Hundreds of dollars, maybe. And for those of you running a small business, it can feel even darker. Imagine discovering a remote employee's laptop was stolen,
Oh, wow.
and it had client tax data on it. Sensitive stuff. Stolen right out of their car.
Oof. Okay, so in any of those moments your adrenaline is pumping, the first instinct is just crisis mode, right?
Yeah.
Change passwords, call the bank, freeze the cards, maybe call the police.
You feel like you're doing the right thing, tackling the immediate security problem head on.
We handled it. We reacted.
And that's the assumption that can be really dangerous. That's really the core of what we're digging into today based on the Substack. It's this huge regulatory trap that can spring on you after you think the crisis is handled.
After the initial panic is over.
Yeah, long after. The Substack points out, and it's critical, you could run a perfect incident response, secure the breach, stop the bleeding, so to speak, and still have the whole thing just blow up.
Ow.
Because you missed a required external notification. You didn't tell the right person or agency by the deadline.
So it sounds like the paperwork failure, the administrative side, can actually end up costing more than the original hack or theft.
Precisely. Often much more. The reporting failure, that procedural mistake, it morphs into the secondary problem that can dwarf the original incident.
Okay, which is why our mission today is to really break down the specific risk. The author calls it Incident Response Requirement 6, IR-6, basically external notification requirements.
Yes.
So we're shifting from the what to do in a crisis, which we've touched on before, to focus completely on who needs to know, and crucially for you listening, when they need to know.
Yeah, it really boils down to documenting those deadlines before you ever need them. So you don't have that horrible realization weeks or months later that a simple phone call you delayed is now costing you serious money, or worse, putting you in regulatory hot water.
Let's zoom in on that personal angle first, what you called the individual trap. It seems so easy to fall into. You see those weird charges on your card.
Yeah.
You're slammed at work. Life is crazy. You think, okay, I'll deal with it Friday. I'm just too busy right now. That little delay feels harmless.
But it's absolutely not, financially speaking. What's fascinating and kind of scary is how fast putting off that call changes your liability. Most credit cards offer zero liability for fraud, right?
Right. That's the big selling point. It is. But that protection hinges on you reporting the fraud within their specific time frame. The Substack gives this clear example. If you wait, say, a few days past that window, uh-oh.
That zero liability, poof, it can vanish, and suddenly you might be on the hook for, say, $50.
Wait, $50, not like the amount that was stolen, but a separate $50. Is that like a penalty?
Yeah, it's basically a penalty for missing that deadline. It's a financial nudge, let's say, to make sure you report promptly. It's the system enforcing vigilance. And here's the key takeaway for everyone listening. Check your agreements, but most cards require you report fraud within a really tight window, usually 48 to 60 hours, to keep that full $0 protection. 48 hours. That's fast, especially when you're maybe still reeling from the shock of it.
It is incredibly fast. And it's so easy to miss if you're focused on changing passwords, checking other accounts, just dealing with the initial mess.
Okay, I get the rule, but realistically, in that moment of panic, paperwork isn't top of mind. Is there any wiggle room usually, or is it a really hard line?
It tends to be a surprisingly hard line. From the bank's perspective, they need to know immediately to shut things down, prevent wider fraud. So the answer isn't hoping for grace.
It's being prepared. Exactly. It's having that fraud reporting number already saved somewhere. You can actually find it easily, even when you're stressed. We'll talk more about that prep piece later.
Okay. And beyond just bank fraud, the Substack points out there's a whole list of other personal incidents where notifications are key, things we might overlook.
Oh, absolutely. Think about your phone or laptop getting stolen. Okay, you call the police, good start.
Yeah.
But you also need to call your mobile carrier, like immediately. Shut down the service.
Right. Stop data usage calls.
Yep. Notify your banks if you had apps or saved logins. And critically, if that device had any access to work stuff, email files, anything, you absolutely have to notify your employer. fast.
And the email compromise scenario you mentioned earlier, that sounds like a notification nightmare.
It really expands. You have to warn your contacts who got those spammy messages, obviously. But then you need to think about every other service where you use that email address for logins or password recovery.
Oh, wow, yeah. All those password reset links.
Exactly. It becomes this urgent administrative task.
Yeah.
Right when you're least equipped to handle it.
Okay. So if it's that complicated and potentially costly for an individual missing a deadline by a few hours, what happens when a business drops the ball? The scale must be completely different.
It's a different universe of pain, frankly. If a few hours cost you $50 personally, a missed regulatory deadline for a business can lead to, well, six-figure fines are unheard of, plus massive reputational damage. Let's go back to that stolen laptop example, the accounting firm. Laptop with client data gone. They did the immediate things right, called the police, improved their security, even told the affected clients. Yep, ticked all the boxes for immediate response and ethical client care. But they missed a compliance link. They didn't research it, maybe didn't realize they had to notify a specific state agency within a legally mandated time frame.
And that failure comes back to bite them later.
Often much later, long after they think the incident is closed. Suddenly they get a letter from the state attorney general's office or another regulator. Now they're facing formal inquiries, potential fines, legal bills.
Even though they already notified the clients who were actually impacted?
Yes, because the law in that state likely required notifying the state as well, maybe under different conditions or timelines and notifying individuals. The key insight for the Substack here is that regulatory failure, missing that official notification, often causes far more long-term damage than the original data breach itself.
So what's the ultimate cost? It's not just the fine, is it?
No, the fine might just be the start. You're talking intense legal scrutiny. You might lose eligibility for certain government contracts. Your insurance premiums could skyrocket. And maybe the worst part, the hit to client confidence when this becomes public knowledge, potentially long after the fact, that can threaten the entire business, all from missing a bureaucratic deadline.
And the reason this happens so often, according to the source, is because there's no single federal rule for data breaches. It's a patchwork.
Exactly. It varies wildly state by state. A business operating across the country might need to juggle requirements for 5, 10, even more different states simultaneously.
Wow.
You have to know each state's specific definition of personally identifiable information, or PII. Does losing an encrypted name and email trigger notification in State A? Maybe not. But maybe losing an unencrypted name and address does in State B, even without financial data.
That sounds incredibly complex to track.
It is, and that's just state laws.
Uh-huh.
Then you layer on industry-specific rules. Healthcare has APA, finance has its own regulators.
So you might have state and federal and industry bodies you need to notify?
Potentially, yes. It creates this matrix. You've got financial incidents like the credit card fraud, where it's all about speed, hours matter. Then data breaches, where you need that state-by-state research done beforehand to know the deadlines and even how to notify by mail, email, public notice.
And then the sector-specific rules on top.
Right. Mandating contact with federal agencies or industry groups, sometimes regardless of whether you've told clients. Okay, this paints a pretty daunting picture. Which brings us back to the only real defense: preparation. You can't just wing it when disaster strikes. How do you actually prevent this notification failure? The Substack is really clear on this. The advice is simple but crucial. Figure out what applies to you before anything happens. And critically, write it down where you can find it.
Documentation is key. IR-6 is about knowing the rules and having a plan.
It's almost entirely about pre-planning and documentation.
Okay, let's make that concrete. What are the immediate practical steps for individuals listening right now?
For individuals, two main things. First, seriously, go check your bank and credit card fraud policies, like today. Find out that reporting window. Is it 48 hours? 60? Get the exact phone number for their fraud department. Don't just rely on the main customer service number. Store that number securely, maybe in your phone contacts under a clear name, but also maybe written down somewhere safe.
Okay, know the bank rules and have the number. What's the second thing?
Know your workplace policy for personal device compromise, if that device touches work systems. If your personal phone gets stolen and you use it for work email, who exactly do you notify inside your company? Is there a specific security contact, a required sequence? You need that info accessible too.
That's a really good point, because if your personal breach exposes work data, your employer suddenly shares that regulatory risk we've been talking about.
Exactly. Now, for small businesses, the prep looks a bit different, but it's even more critical.
What does that involve?
It means investing some time, maybe not a lot of money initially, but definitely time researching the data breach laws for every state where you have customers. If you operate in California, New York, and Florida, you need to understand the notification laws for all three.
Okay, research the state laws. That sounds like a job for a lawyer, maybe?
It can be, and the Substack actually suggests leveraging your existing professional network. Talk to your business insurance agent. Talk to your attorney.
What should you ask them? Ask them to help you identify two things. One, the specific legal notification timeline and requirements for data breaches in the states where you operate. Two, the contact information for any mandatory industry or government bodies you'd need to report to. So lean on the experts to get the info, but ultimately the business owner needs to have that checklist ready.
Precisely. You need that documented plan. Who do we call? By when? What information do they need? Have it written down maybe as part of your broader incident response plan.
Okay, so this really ties IR-6 together. External reporting isn't about the initial hack, it's about the follow-up. It's preemptive paperwork, knowing the deadlines, having the contacts, making sure the cleanup effort doesn't cause a bigger secondary disaster.
It's the procedural guardrail, yeah. It protects your finances or your whole business from that escalating fallout just because you missed a reporting step in the chaos.
So we've covered the who needs to know, why those deadlines are so strict, and why preparation and documentation are basically the only solutions here.
And, the Substack hints at this too. Once you have these IR-6 notification steps figured out and written down, the next step is keeping those skills sharp. That loops back to other aspects of incident response, like training, making sure your team, or even just you and your family, actually know what that plan says and could execute it.
Right, so the plan doesn't just gather dust, it needs to be alive, practiced.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So let's leave everyone listening with a final thought, something practical to chew on based on today's deep dive. We talked about checking your credit card policy, definitely do that, but let's think about that work connection again. Beyond the bank, when was the last time you personally checked your employer's official policy for reporting if one of your personal accounts, email, cloud storage, whatever, gets compromised, but it somehow touches your work environment? And here's the real kicker. Is that specific policy document, the one that probably lists the internal contact person and maybe even external deadlines they care about, is it easily accessible to you right now? Like, if your phone was stolen on the way home today, could you find that policy and know who to call at work within, say, 5 minutes?
If the answer's no, or even maybe, then making that information accessible should probably be your top priority after listening to this. That's putting IR-6 into practice before you need it.